My name is Carol Wick, and I'm the president of Sharity Global. We're an international consulting firm that works with nonprofit clients and governments across the globe. Last year, we actually worked in 33 different countries, and we have an extensive team that helps with everything from helping you identify your business plan and scale and grow your nonprofit organization to help you with sustainable funding. So I'm also going to have Elizabeth Fields, if she could introduce herself.
Thanks, Carol, and welcome everybody. My name is Elizabeth Fields. I'm the president and founder of Jackson Fields Consulting. Very proud to be partnering with Sharity Global. I've been helping her, I guess I should say JFC's been helping her with some coursework and these seminars and an upcoming major gift immersive seminar that we're going to be having later in August. My team and I, we have over 30 years of direct fundraising experience. We build fundraising strategies and marketing strategies for smaller and mid-size nonprofits, and we also offer a fractional executive service and have clients around the country. And again, thanks so much for joining today.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm assuming today that everyone is here to hear about how we can move your nonprofit from this kind of crazy year-to-year fundraising and move into more of a sustainable fundraising strategy. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And if you have questions as we go through today, please feel free to just go ahead, put them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. And with that, I'm just going to kind of dive in. So I don't know how many of you feel this way, but I know that in running nonprofits for over 30 years, so often I felt like I was just on this like continual wheel that required that I never get off of it and I never slow down. It's like you would run as fast as you could until the end of the fiscal year, try to raise as much money as you possibly could, take a 2-second breath, and then you'd be right back on the hamster wheel trying to raise the funds that you needed for the following year. And it's just not sustainable, especially in this day and age. There's just no way that you can actually maintain any kind of business, especially a nonprofit business, while you're trying to both deliver services as well as raise the funds you need to have, to pay your staff and pay for everything you need, and then even consider continuing to grow your organization and scale to the level that you want to scale. So we want to get you off that hamster wheel, but I want to ask you first, do any of these sound familiar? Do you ever feel like, what you're doing right now is planning 1 year at a time? In other words, you never really think ahead of the fiscal year, whether your fiscal year ends in December or ends in June. It's just trying to get through this fiscal year, and then the plan is, okay, what are we going to do next year? Completely overwhelmed with current need and demand that you don't really spend time. You spend so much time in the business getting everything done that you don't have time to spend on the business thinking about what do we need to grow, expand, and move the needle forward in terms of not just what we're doing right now, but what we need to be doing in the future. And I will add to that, thinking about really whether or not what we're doing is having the impact we think it does. Working on gap filling funding strategy, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the webinar today, but really not thinking about how much money do we need, but how much do we need to fill the gap between the money we know we have coming in and the money that we don't have coming in, and just enough to make payroll. Building that budget so that it's really just what was last year, let's add 3% to it, and just that's the new budget, not really thinking about what growth strategies would look like. And I know all of you've probably seen this time of year, maybe even rolling into June, where a lot of people have year end in July, or if their year end is in December, and they'll send out an email that says, we're not going to make our year end budget. If you don't give us money, we're going to run deficit for the year, which is like the worst possible communication that you could ever send out. But I see it every single year. And not really having that long-term strategy, not especially, you might have it in your head, but not communicating that to your donors. And then the last thing is transactional giving. A lot of nonprofits get stuck in this. I'm going to give you something for what your gift is. In other words, I'm going to give you a table sponsorship, or I'm going to give you a T-shirt, whatever it might be. But it ends up being transitional or transactional giving rather than focusing on giving for an investment-based giving. So we're going to talk about why you get stuck in those places. And that was like kind of a handful of things that people experience. But I want to say that it doesn't matter the size of the organization. We work with nonprofits, especially, I would say probably 80 to 90% of them are stuck in that strategy. They're stuck in this panic of how do we make budget this year? How do we fill the need? How do we make sure that we have enough money for what we're trying to do right here and right now? And they're also really, really busy doing everything at once. And when you get into that kind of just grind, it's really difficult to move out of that space. So I want to just kind of go over some of the top reasons that nonprofits get stuck. And the first one is that 62% of nonprofits do not have a plan, meaning they do not have a written business plan that they are following to drive their organization towards some sort of growth strategy. They might have something in their head. They might say, okay, we really want to 2 years from now build this building and or expand this program or have this specific thing happen. But there's really not a written business plan that they're actively using on the business. And I want to compare that to a second with a for-profit. Can you imagine a for-profit business opening a business without any kind of business plan whatsoever about where the money's going to come from, who they're going to serve, what their target market is, and what the importance of the service or product that they're providing is, and why it's so important that they have it, or that they produce this product or service. Of course, you can't imagine that a for-profit would do that. And why is that? Because if they're not bringing in revenue, if people don't want what they are producing, then they're not going to have a business for very long. And that's why, even with those plans, about half of for-profit businesses go out of business in the first year. Most nonprofits start in a very different way. They start with somebody seeing a need. That person goes out and they start filling that need, whether it's people who are hungry or children that need shoes or backpacks to start school with, or veterans that need some sort of support or services. Doesn't matter what the issue is, it usually starts from somebody volunteering their time, going out and working to fill some need that they see in the community. It comes from the heart. So suddenly, in a blink of an eye, sometimes 10 years has gone by. And what they've been doing is they've been asking friends and family, people they're connected to, people their friends and family are connected to. Maybe they've grown a little bit larger than that. Well, now all of a sudden they have an active functioning nonprofit. Maybe they even have a staff member or two, but they're still working on that same heart strategy as opposed to a business strategy. And it's at this point, you have to make a decision as a nonprofit. Are you going to grow? Are you just going to kind of keep doing the same thing you're doing? Because if you want to keep doing the same thing at the same level, that strategy will probably work. But if you want to be more, if you want to do more, if you want to have more impact, then you have to have a plan of how we're going to get there. And again, 62% doesn't matter the size of the organization, don't have that plan in place. And what results from not having that plan in place is this year-to-year focus. I don't know how many of you are actively involved with nonprofits, and at the end of the fiscal year, May comes up, you're just now developing that next year fiscal budget and getting it approved in the last quarter of the fiscal year. again, whether your fiscal year doesn't matter what it is, but if you're developing and planning your budget the last quarter of the fiscal year, and then putting that into the fundraising or the accounting system right before the beginning of the fiscal year, and off to the races you go. The fundraising for the year is then based on what you know you're going to have coming in and what you don't know you're having coming in. And then that's what's handed over to the development person, and then they're told to raise that amount. And if, I don't know, if could let us know in the chat how many of you actually are in that kind of strategy right now where you're doing a year-to-year budget. That budget is usually based on last year actuals, maybe with a little bit of an increase. And then that fundraising budget is definitely linked directly to the gap between what you know you have coming in and what you don't have coming in. So imagine that's how almost all of my clients, when I go in and we start working with them, that's usually what we see. The next challenge is nonprofits don't talk about impact. And when I say impact, I mean outcomes. A lot of nonprofits talk about the outputs. They talk about how many things that they do. They talk about what they do. What they don't talk about is why they do it and what will happen because they do it. And that's a small but very, very, very important component of working with a nonprofit that's sustainable. When you just talk about outputs, and outputs are things that you can count on your fingers. They are pounds of food that you produce or give away. They are the number of counseling sessions that you provide, the number of people who graduate from a program, even the number of people that you house or the number of animals rescued. All of those things are outputs. That means that you worked with a lot of people, you did a lot of work, you were incredibly busy. It absolutely does not tell your donor whether or not what you did when you were busy has any impact whatsoever. So, what we have to be able to do is stop talking about what we do and talk about why we do it. What is not just what the program is that we offer, not what the services are that we offer, but why are we offering those services? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? That service works to solve. And then after someone or we've done the intervention that our nonprofit is known for, what happens to solve that original problem? How successful are we? That is, at the end of the day, what people fund is that outcome. They want to know that if they give you money, not that you're going to do a program, but that the program that you do will have a lasting impact that they care about. And this is a diagram I love to share. When we talk to donors, we want to use every single one of these things. And they're all amazing tools in the toolkit. But when you look at the warm, fuzzy appeals that you often see when you get a direct mail offering that tells a story about a specific child, or it tells about a family, or even a dire situation that your organization was dealing with. Maybe you even tell an anecdotal story about that. And we talk about the types of people that you serve or the types of situations that you're dealing with. All of those are in that output range. And people will give when you do that. But typically they're going to give one time and they're going to give a small amount. As we start to move toward where we talk about outcomes and even more importantly, economic impact and return on investment, that's where people stop just thinking about, oh, my heart, I want to give something and make this better. And they start using their head. They start thinking about making an investment. And when someone starts to think about making an investment, that's when they're going to start to pull out their checkbook. They're going to start thinking about what resources they have that they can put into your organization and your methodology, because the outcomes, and more importantly, impact that may affect their bottom line, is what they're really willing to invest in. So that's where we want to be. It's not that we ever want to leave the heart behind, because that's the root of the work that we do in nonprofits. But we have to get to this point where we're also capturing the person's head and helping them understand what their money is going to fund and ultimately the change it's going to make. So the next reason that teams get stuck, or the nonprofits get stuck, is they don't have the right team on board. And they might have really great operational staff, but they don't have the team that can open the doors for them that they need to have opened. And they tend to have a team that focuses not on major gifts, but they focus on events. So when we see, and one of the reasons that Elizabeth and I and our teams are actually busy is because it's really, really hard to find a good nonprofit fundraiser. And part of the reason it's hard to find good nonprofit fundraisers is because most of them have learned how to fundraise through events. They've learned this year to year cyclical cycle, and they haven't been properly trained on how to scale organizations by looking long term. Now, having said that, it's not just all in their hands, right? It's an organizational strategy, but having the right team on board, having people who can open doors, having other people that once that door is open, know and understand the process to cultivate, steward, and then ultimately ask the right amount, and then continue to steward and continuing to support that investor, is critical to being able to scale your organization. Obviously, you still have to have a phenomenal team. You have to have the right accounting staff. You have to have the right operational teams, and you have to have inspirational leadership. But not having that right team on board, not having a team that your investors can trust to pull it off, is one of the things that keeps people stuck. And the last one I want to talk about is just too many asks. And we see this a lot, that because nonprofits don't go in and assess who's on their donor list, who they're doing the ask to, they ask everybody the same all the time. And the asks can come in a whole host of forms. And you have to really sit back and think about, how are you asking people on your donor database or on your mailing list? How are you asking them to engage? And are you asking everybody to engage in the same way? And are you hammering them both on social media and your email marketing and maybe even direct communication in so many different ways, and asking them for so many different things that they just get overwhelmed? Um, a lot of that happens when we do what we call crisis fundraising, meaning something happens and it isn't necessarily a crisis, like there's a natural disaster or something like that. But when I say crisis, it means that a new puppy hoarding situation was just discovered, or perhaps you've had a new child that's come into a group home that needs to be sponsored. Um, Whatever it might be, it ends up being something where there's an opportunity to, on the spot, fundraise. Someone thinks, well, this is a great opportunity. Let's go ahead and do an ask of our donor database. We also ask them to attend events. We ask them to buy tickets. We ask them to invite other people to come to to sponsor a table and invite other people. So we ask them to engage in that way. Maybe even do a something else at the event to support it. Provide in-kind food or drinks. We might ask them to be a major sponsor. I might actually identify that someone is a potential major sponsor and then go in and ask them for a major multi-year gift. Or sponsor, become part of a giving level sponsor, sponsor a child, sponsor a particular event, sponsor a program or activity. And then, of course, we have our annual fund. We have our direct mail. We have the regular just annual fund asks to come out. And if you can imagine being on the other side of the table, being that donor, and you're getting hit with all of these different requests, what happens? Well, eventually you just kind of shut down. And that's when you start to see your lapsed donor rate go up because you're not stepping back and thinking critically about who are we asking, how are we asking, and what are we asking them for? We're just blanket asking everybody for everything. And then we're wondering why people aren't engaging and responding to us. And this is one of the reasons. And finally, we just don't have enough cultivated donors. As I just mentioned, we go to the same people with multiple levels of asks all the time. Sometimes we just don't ask at all. And I see this a lot where we have organizations that have cultivated, they brought people out, they've had them at events, and they really have just never sat down and asked them for money. Or we're just not asking at the right level. So I had this happen recently with someone that said that they had a donor that was giving a small amount every month, and they just didn't think that it was worth their time. But when we were able to take a look at some information about that person, we found out they had the ability to make a six-figure gift. So sometimes it's the people who are donating even in kind or even volunteering that we go in with a very small ask based on what they're currently giving, not realizing that that might just be a test to see how you respond, how you cultivate, and what you do with that little bit of money. So we always want to make sure that we're having a really good strategy for every single person on who engages with our organization. So that brings me to the 5 elements. And the 5 elements are something that's not something that I just kind of came up with, but we call it the Sharity 5-factor analysis. But what we know is that when financial investors of very wealthy people sit down and talk to them about how they should invest their money, both in the market, real estate, wherever they put their money, but also how they should invest their money into nonprofits, they tell them to look for some of the same things that they tell them to look for when they look at market investments. And we're going to go over those because what we know is it doesn't matter if it is someone in your local community or Mackenzie Scott. These 5 elements are what they're going to be looking for to vet your organization before they make a major gift. They're going to be looking for, do you have that business plan that we talked about? Is it written down and does it make sense to them? Do you have a budget that covers the entire plan? So if you have a 3-year plan, you need to have a 3-year forward-looking, what we call pro forma, but a budget that looks forward 3 years. So if you have a strategic plan that goes through 2027, you better have a budget for 24, 25, 26, so that they can see exactly that you've looked at and understood what you need to scale the organization and cover all of the costs. They want to know what's going to happen. If you're successful, if you raise the money that you need to do this plan, what are those outcomes? What is the ongoing lasting change that's going to happen because your organization was successful? They're looking at the why, not the what. They're going to look at that team that I mentioned. They're going to be looking at your board. They're going to make sure that your board is giving and supporting this plan. They want to know that your staff is capable of carrying it out. And who's that person they're going to be engaging with on that development team or a peer that's going to be opening that door. And finally, they want to know that they're not alone, that you're not just relying on them for the financial support, that you have a mix of funding, but that also other people that they know and trust are also donating. And we're seeing more and more, a lot of donors say, I'm going to come in at the end. So you go ahead and raise the first part of it and then come back to me and I'll finish it off. They want to see that the other people support you and that you've been able to garner other investments before they come in. So that leads us to major gifts, because what gets you off that hamster wheel is all those different components, but it's also understanding what a major gift is. And this is really critically important because when they train fundraisers, They train them about fundraising, but unfortunately, most of the fundraising that you get trained in is the hamster wheel method. They really don't train you in forward thinking, strategic major gifts. And just like a bookkeeper is going to keep your books and they're going to do month to month bookkeeping, and a CFO is going to be strategic and they're going to be looking forward and forecasting where your business is going to be and what your monthly burn rate is and what you need to be bringing in 6 months from now. A major gifts officer is going to be strategic. They're going to be thinking forward, they're going to be looking ahead. Whereas an annual fund person is just going to be on that hamster wheel, churning, trying to get those events done, trying to bring in as much money as they possibly can. So it's two completely different strategies. It's also two different types of people. In fundraising, when we look at fundraising, there's so many different components to it. Money comes into your organization in a lot of different ways. I like to think of this diagram as the how, not the who. You can get money from online sales, product fundraising. Girl Scouts is a great example, right? They sell cookies. Some of you may have just got caught up in the Girl Scout cookie sales. Um, there's online fundraising, and sometimes you have online product sales. You might get in-kind donations, whether it's food or clothing or even volunteer time. You may have a financial endowment and you're earning money based on interest that money is sitting in a bank. Of course, we have special events and we have grants. And then, of course, we have just people who just give individually. But typically, this is how the money flows into an organization, and we call it fundraising. And we think about the how we fundraise or how the money comes in, and not the strategy behind how do we cultivate the people who may, in fact, give us a grant. They may, in fact, fund a special event. They may write a major gift check. They may give us an endowment or make a gift to our endowment. Those are the people behind this is the how they give. So don't confuse the two. This is more of the split of your revenue. So when you start thinking about how money again comes into your organization, earned revenue is going to have a different target market than an annual fund, than events, than grants versus major gifts. So as you start to think about your fundraising in a different way, and I have these broken into equal pies, but what would be really nice, those of you that have all of these different components to your revenue mix, the more earned revenue you have, the more sustainable your organization, provided that that earned revenue is based on a really good business practice. Events really should be one of the smallest portions of your fundraising and should be focused on cultivation and bringing new donors in, as well as recognition of donors. Your annual fund, which is where most people spend most of their time, really should be your smaller donors who are going to be giving small amounts or one time. And then your grants and your major gifts are going to be your larger amounts of money from a fundraising perspective. And it's really where you're going to spend the majority of your time. If you're spending the majority of your time on events, you need to rethink the way that you're spreading out your pie. Because ultimately, this is how revenue flows into a nonprofit. If you are a for-profit board member and you're trying to explain to your for-profit board member about revenue, this is a great thing to show them with the appropriate percentages because all for-profits are earned revenue. They're all product sales, service sales, right? So they're all coming in from one type of customer and then going out into operations. Nonprofit fundraising and nonprofit revenue development is much, much more complicated, which is part of why nonprofit accounting is so much more complicated because you have so many more moving parts. And the people who typically give you the money are not the end user of your product. So it's a whole different, this is why nonprofits are not like for-profits. Bottom line, this is the one thing that really captures that. But it's important that you know that breakout. So this brings me to a major gifts officer. And what does a major gifts officer do? This is not the same as a director of development in a traditional nonprofit. Major gifts officers have a very defined prospect list of individuals that they are cultivating, that they are working to move up into a pipeline that I'm going to show you in order to get them to give a major gift. They also steward and maintain those relationships. They focus on closing and increasing gifts from previous donors and making sure that those donors don't lapse. They're also focused on large multi-year gifts. It often takes for a major gift 12 to 24 months to secure that gift. So this is not fast fundraising. It's not like people come into an event and at the end of the event, I was at one last night, end of the event before we'd even left, they announced the amount of money that they had raised. And it was a lot of money. And it's almost as if it's like a hit of a rush of adrenaline to see all that money that just came in from that event. With major gifts officers, sometimes people get really frustrated with them because it does take a while. But once the gift comes in, it's a much larger sum, it's a lot more secure, and oftentimes the funding is going to help stabilize the organization as opposed to a fundraising event, which keeps you again going after new donors every single year. And this is what they're working on. They're working on moving individuals up this ladder. They're evaluating whether or not this person has the capacity to make a gift. What is the strategy we should be using for them? Do they have wealth versus income? Because we know sometimes people have a lot of land, their money's tied up in investments, and it's not something that they can just write a check. So we want to make sure this person has the ability to write the check that matches that capacity level. We also want to make sure that they're interested in what we're doing. And is the interest light or is it deep? I mean, how connected to our mission are they? Are they a person with lived experience who has become very successful? Or are they somebody that just kind of, maybe it's sort of something that they've given money to the past, but it's not something they're really connected to, your organization. And then looking at, is the connection emotional versus rational? Is this something where the person is really, again, it's a heart thing for them? Or is this something where they're really thinking about the benefit to their company, to themselves, or to a personal goal that they have? And so the connection is more rational. What we want is that perfect marriage of the two, but we have to know what their connection is and how do we help make that connection stronger. And then finally, it's this person's job to make sure that ask happens. Because a lot of times we'll see where people will connect them, they'll cultivate, they have all these great connections, and you'll see these the development people, and they're out and they're always at parties and they're always, everybody knows who they are and everybody loves them, but they never raise any money because they don't do the final step, which is ask. So this is what major gifts officers spend their time doing. And this is another kind of a diagram of that pipeline. So major gifts officers' job is to look at all those people who attended that fundraiser last night or who've come into to the pipeline in some way, whether it's through social media or through some sort of event that you had. Identify from that pipeline who qualifies in what category. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But qualifying those people as either major gifts prospects or annual fund prospects, or maybe just a connector. They then cultivate that person. If the person is not interested, we bless and release. We let them go. We don't try to force somebody into our cultivation pipeline. I often hear fundraisers say, I've been working this person for 4 years and they're just not interested. Then don't work them anymore. Let them go. Don't spend your time on someone who's really not interested in your organization. Finally, their job is, again, to solicit. Hopefully, even if the first solicitation is small, it doesn't mean that they can't go back and build the relationship with that person, prove to that person that you've used their money well, and then ask for a major gift later. And I'm going to use the Gates Foundation as a great example here. Um, a lot of times, I've had several clients that have gotten money from the Gates Foundation, and people are like, we just need to ask them for money. Well, that's not how the Gates Foundation works. You have to be qualified by them, you have to cultivate them, engage in them. They typically give you a small one time gift. If you come back and prove to them that what you're doing is actually valuable and can move the needle on impact areas that they're working on, they potentially will invest a major gift into the issue that you're working on. And that's how that works. And that's what a lot of major donors do. I think that's a misnomer that you cultivate someone and you get that seven-figure gift right off the bat. And that's not usually what happens, although I have had that happen. It's not normally what happens. Normally, there is a process of building on that gift. Once they've made that, you go right back. Is this person qualified for another gift or a higher gift? What is that stewardship cultivation? And it's a well-oiled pipeline, and it never stops. Otherwise, then you end up with people who write very large checks who then aren't cultivated and stewarded and thanked appropriately, and then they walk away from your organization, and that's not what you want either. So this is the pipeline strategy, and this is what major donors spend their time doing, or major gifts officers spend their time doing. Um, and I've mentioned that having enough volunteers is really important. And I'm not going to go into this a whole lot, except to say that um, probably one of the number one reasons people call us is they say they need more donors and they need us to help them find donors. And the first thing you do is you look inside your current database. You would be amazed at how often I'm able to do a wealth screen on a current client's donor base or connections base and find literally millions of dollars of untapped opportunity within their current donor database. And it's because they just haven't looked. So before you go looking for new donors, look and see who's already connected, who's already passionate about your organization, who's already been identified as someone who cares about your mission, and we just have to qualify them. So we want to look at, if you're going into your database, is how much have they given over time? How often do they give, or how recently have they given? Are they a monthly donor? It could be a $10 monthly donor that could be one of your wealthiest opportunities. Um, what's their affiliation? Are they working for a company that does matching giving? Are they currently own their own company? Are they retired? How have they engaged with you in the past? And then again, what is that capacity? And usually you do that through a wealth screening. And then going in and taking a look at other types of gifts, and how we can start to think about people that we may want to do wealth screening, touch base with, start to cultivate and qualify as a major gift prospects that are currently giving to us. And then we break it down. We start looking at segmenting our donor base. And you probably have heard about segmentation, but I can't stress how important segmentation is, especially when you start getting a donor database or a database of over 1,000 people. It gets to be overwhelming for a nonprofit. Even really honestly, over a couple hundred, it starts to get overwhelming. What you want to look at is the donors who give the majority of your funding. You want to spend about 90% of your time there. For those who give you that smaller amount, this is more like the annual fund. Those are the people that you want to spend about 10%. And the people who aren't giving you anything, they're engaging on social media, maybe they're getting your newsletter, doesn't mean that you cut them off. It just means that you're not going to be spending a lot of time cultivating those individuals. They're friends. They may open a door. They're your supporters. You still want to share, what you're doing and include them where they want to get involved. But you don't want to spend your time cultivating those individuals and trying to ask them for gifts, because they're probably not going to give. And then for those people that are that 90%, we have to have individualized plans. So once we've qualified them, we basically want to build a map out, and every single person is different. One of the things that we do at Charity for our clients is if we have a major donor prospect, we actually create an individual plan so that that qualified prospect has a strategy. We know exactly what we're going to be doing with them, who the connector is, what the pipeline strategy is going to look like, how we're going to cultivate them, and how we're going to engage them. You typically would do that in your donor database. You would have all of that information. You might have it on an individual page. You might be part of a wealth screen, but you want to make sure that you have an individual strategy for people, including and up to how you would do the ask and who would be involved in the ask. Without that, then you end up just having a segment of larger donors that you're just kind of splattering things at. So again, having that individualized cultivation plan is really important. So before I take questions, I just want to share with you what we have coming up, which is here in Orlando, August 21st through 23rd. Elizabeth and I will be teaching a major gifts officer training program. So we're going to have a 2-day certification in major gifts for anybody who wants to attend. This includes a virtual onboarding seminar. We would actually help you go through your donor database, current database, figure out who it is that we need to do a wealth screen on. We would do that wealth screen for you. You would bring that with you to the 2-day seminar. And then we would do an intensive training on major gifts, help you understand exactly what it means to take people through this major gifts process. And once you've gotten your training, you get the certificate in major gifts. You also get a virtual toolkit with literally everything you need, turnkey, to be able to run a major gifts program, from the letters you need, the forms, the spreadsheets, even down to what your business plan should look like, and materials and internal and external materials. And then we'll give you 5 post-seminar coaching sessions to help you implement the strategy that you've developed. So this training program is very comprehensive, really allows us to teach you how to do not the hamster wheel version, but the major gifts training and how to be a major gifts officer and lead that process. So I don't know, Elizabeth, if you'd like to add anything in here before we take questions.
I just, I wanted to emphasize a couple of things that Carol had mentioned during her presentation. And I know I've worked with some of the organizations that are on this call. The ones who really want to put that long-term strategy in place, you're going to be the most successful, hands down. Really taking time to cultivate. A lot of you know that stewardship, I'm obsessed with it, properly stewarding your donors, going through that cycle again, finding their ability to give and their interest in give, matching your priorities. It's really going to pay off in the long run. And you're going to have that sustainability and growth that you're looking for. I've joined partnership with Sharity because I've helped her coach some of these major gift seminars and other fundraising classes, and I can tell you that you really do get basically a major gift program built for you, and that you can just walk away with and see a lot of success in your organization.
And we've really tried to price this at a level because it's not just a 2-day training course. It really is a turnkey major gifts and really scale your nonprofit opportunities. And it's about really less than about 20% you would pay for a capital campaign feasibility study, and you can do it in-house. So with that, I want to take any questions that any of our participants may have today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you all. So who has questions for us? All right, somebody has to jump in
Silent
first.
group here. I know a couple of you, and you always have really good questions. So
all right, I'm going to call on somebody if they don't pop in here first, just to break the ice. Ashanti, do you have a question? All right. So, Leanne, I'm gonna pick on you because you did put a comment in the oh, you're gonna type out a question. Go ahead and just take yourself off mute and you can ask it.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, great. So I don't, this is kind of related to what you're talking about, Carol. So, one of the challenges that I'm having is our CRM is not ideal for donor management. And it's almost like Mac DOS, like it's just frustrating. And so, I'm wondering if you have any suggestions on how to best manage my mind when you're trying to put together this major donor portfolio, when you're trying to schedule out your touches, when you're trying to keep track of their contribution, like the aggregates of like their most recent and their biggest and the contributions to date. And so I put together like a large Excel sheet, but I just kind of made it up. So I'm just wondering if you have better ways to keep track of all of the things.
Um, my response to that would be a better CRM, because your organization is large enough that you need to upgrade. And I don't, do you mind sharing what software system you're using right now?
So we actually just got the system. So we used to use Donor Perfect. And I'm not sure what the reasoning was about why we wanted to switch away from that. That happened
It's pretty
before I came
bad,
on
but
board.
yeah.
So we now use something called Every Action. I don't know if
Oh
anyone's
yeah,
familiar
I'm very
with that.
familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So that actually is not designed really for major gifts.
Yeah.
It's not a bad CRM. Um, Joanna will remember a client that we had that in common that she that used that one. Um, hmm. It's kind of almost more like Qualtrics. So, what CRM? Brandon wants to know what CRM we recommend. So, I can tell you, and I have no skin in the game. I don't get any kind of money or anything from them, but the ones that I prefer to use with my client, I love Boomerang personally. I think it's really super intuitive to use. It's really user friendly in terms of being able to pull reports. It's intuitive in terms of telling you when you need to follow up with someone and qualifying them and all those things.
Would you say,
Um,
please?
Boomerang. Little Green Light is another one that's also very user friendly. There's a bunch of them out there. I don't know, Elizabeth, if you have a favorite.
I think Little Green Light is really good for, I suspect, where a lot of your organizations are at. It will grow with you over time. It is very intuitive. It's fairly easy to use. Definitely get off that Excel spreadsheet for sure. For anybody that's using that, and make sure that you're actually using a program that is truly meant for donor prospecting and donor management. I do like Boomerang. Again, I'm with Carol. There's no like incentive to be sitting there and saying anything, to no benefit to be endorsing these. I actually have had a good experience with Kindful, Stay Away from Network for Good, like 100%. And
And Donor
uh,
Perfect.
yeah, Donor Perfect, Razor's Edge, not so
Oh,
much.
it,
Um,
I've used every action and it's just really hard. It's really hard to use. If you're in a situation, and there may be the end somebody that I can get to help you with that one. But if you're in a situation where you can't get a new one, oh well. And I actually have seen that people are getting into like 3-year contracts with these CRMs, which is really frightening. But I'm what you need to do is find somebody who can use the software that you're in and who's intuitive and can go in and set up the reports and all the different things that you need to be able to use it more effectively. And that is one that is kind of like Salesforce, where they kind of forced it into being a nonprofit CRM, and it's really not meant to be that. It's meant to be an online, like a Qualtrics. Um, So you have to find somebody who can help you, who can make it user friendly. And Elizabeth may have somebody. I'm not sure if she can, if Janine's can handle that kind of every action. But Michelle, you have a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We use Little Green Light. I like it a lot. We got it from TechSoup the first year for free. So that might be helpful for somebody who's on a budget. It doesn't have a texting program where you can send out text messages. So I don't like that, but you can add a lot of different options to it, like Zapier and some of that. We haven't done all that, but it is available to do that.
Yeah. I think that's the other thing is really taking a look at your CRM and seeing what is its capacity. And thinking about that stewardship and your CRM, what can you set up in advance so that when someone comes in, you can trigger a certain pipeline? So if they come in and they give that $100 plus as their first gift, what is the strategy already set up in your CRM to do some of that stewardship and some of those triggers? So you can set those triggers up so that that goes in, and then you have that process already in place. So whatever your stewardship strategy is, and whatever that plan is, your CRM should complement that and support you as a development professional and as a major gifts officer to not only start the process, but trigger a response from the team.
I'm going to also add that make sure that you clean up your data before you even put it into a CRM, right? It's only going to be helpful if your data is as clean as possible. Before you could easily get frustrated with every CRM if the data is just, I mean, listen, it's not going to be perfect. Nothing's ever perfect, but get it as cleaned up as possible before you actually upload it into our CRM.
Yeah. Yeah. Bad data in, bad information out. Yes. Just as VPC staff. So go ahead.
My name's Destry. So I guess I did join a little late, unfortunately, so I will definitely check out the recording. But I am just curious, like hearing all of this. I used to work for a nonprofit with a lot larger budget and a lot more staff. Right now, I work for a nonprofit with 3 staff members, and I'm the only development person. So I'm trying to kind of apply some of these bigger concepts to a smaller role. And I'm wondering if you have any advice at this stage. I mean, when I started, we didn't even have a spreadsheet. We have a binder of donations and donor tracking. And so I'm working on getting, some better systems in place so we can really grow our development program. But if you have any advice for starting off, our board is not as familiar with this, and I'm really helping guide us on this. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first part of that is figuring out what that revenue mix is going to be.
Mhm.
And really, obviously, the plan is critical and all of those pieces. But once you figure out what that revenue mix is, then trying to figure out what's the best use of time.
Mhm.
Because as you start to, a lot of times it's easy to just treat everybody the same when you're small, right? And so there has to be a segmentation no matter what the size of your donor database is and who are those top prospects. And let's just say people who can give, I'm just going to say $10,000 or more, go on to a special list. And then you have to enlist the help of board members or other people to help cultivate and steward those individuals. And maybe you're still responsible for the ask, or maybe the ED is also responsible for the ask. But really understanding your revenue mix and the amount of time that you're spending, because it's so easy to get caught in spending 80% of your time doing special events that bring in 20% of your revenue.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing I would recommend you do.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bob, any burning questions?
No, I'm recently on the board with Central Florida Home for Good, and we're a baby not-for-profit. All of this is very helpful. I think you know Kim Fogel.
Mm-hmm.
So I plan to share my notes.
Good. And Dick, it's good to see you as well. Do you have any questions? Got time for, oh, you're muted, Dick.
I forgot that you guys don't do lip reading too well. Uh, we just have a funky little school with, I think, 12 kids now, K through 6. And we're not quite a year old. And so we haven't gotten anywhere near. We're going to need some hand holding early, I'm pretty sure. And
All right, great.
maybe coming to you with my hand out.
All right. Well, thank you all. It's the top of the hour. I don't want to keep you any longer. I appreciate everybody coming today. We're going to get this recording and put it up on YouTube, send you all a link to it. And we're going to have 2 more webinars because I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into major gifts officers and how to find one, how to cultivate one, how to really handhold and keep your major gift officer happy. And then some more of the nuts and bolts of what that campaign looks like and some of the forms and practices that you're going to need. So stay with us and sign up for those next 2. So take care, everybody.